This episode focused entirely on Castle Black and obviously the battle to defend it, and it was very well done, like a big budget action film. Game of Thrones, Season 4, Episode 9, The Watchers on the Wall.
Well, hello, my brothers and sisters and giants and Mance Raider, wildling, free folk, and all my watchers on the wall. I, as always, am Jim, here to bring you another review on the awesome and epic adventure and action-filled tale of Game of Thrones. Now, last week's episode, of course, wrapped up a number of different storylines that we had going, but really just the screams of Oberyn Martell it just still are resonating and echoing throughout my head. It really just turned my stomach the way that was set up, and certainly things left off on a cliffhanger-like note. Things pick up over here on what I have found to be one of the least interesting stories or storylines. I'm not as emotionally invested, I guess, in the Watchers on the Wall in Castle Black. And I think it's just because a lot of it hasn't been developed very well, and especially in this season, we knew the whole season that Mance Raider was coming. However, there was not one scene with him all season long to kind of just give us a little check-in or to maybe just show a nice scale and size scope shot of his army. So really, this episode, the entire episode takes place in Castle Black, and to me, that was a big mistake. It looks like next week's season finale is going to be epic, and it's going to, tie up all those loose ends that they left from last week. But I find it to be complete bullshit that they went in a show that normally has so many different threads and so many different things to follow, that they kind of went the way that they did in Season 2, Episode 9 with the Battle of Blackwater, where it just focused on the Watchers on the Wall, right? Just on Castle Black. And of course, the action was great. It was crazy. And the funny part is that when I started watching Game of Thrones, this is what I thought Game of Thrones was going to be this cool, like, fantasy type medieval, just fucking action fest, right? But then after a few episodes, I saw that that's not what it was. That it was this sort of it was a drama. It was a soap opera, so to speak. But and I don't mean that in a bad way. Set in these medieval type of times in this land that obviously has a lot of nods to various fantasy and lore and things like that. So it's definitely I didn't hate the episode by any means. That's certainly a strong word. But it was not my favorite episode. I think action-wise, I think it was absolutely wonderful the way everything was done. The special effects, it looked like a big-budget motion picture. And that's absolutely what it should look like. It's it's just this huge battle and the epic proportion and scale of it, and really how they were able to go and pull and do some of these great tracking shots and everything was wonderful. It opens up pretty mundane and boring, as it most of the time is when they have a scene at Castle Black. It's very bleak there. Everything and all the color is obviously just kind of washed out. They're far up in the north over there. And I mean, whether they're in the castle or they're up on the wall, it's always just it just feels like this cold, desolate place that you don't want to be at, So it starts out though, and opens up with a shot of Jon and of course Samwell Tarly up on the up on the top of the wall. We know that from last episode, or maybe it was the episode before, when he suggested caving in and flooding the tunnel and all that. Alistair Thorne wound up placing him and Samwell up on there, and they're going to be on watch duty, for a fortnight or whatever until Mance Raider actually gets there. So, and it's funny because I found out a few weeks back that a fortnight is actually like 14 days. It's like 2 weeks. But the term is overused in here so much. Everything. Like when Cersei was trying to set up the marriage between, Tommen and Marjorie, don't get married. And, well, what about when you're going to get married? He said, I'll get married in a fortnight. It's like everything's a fortnight. So apparently that's how they measure time in here. Nothing is tomorrow. Nothing is next week. Everything is a fortnight. It's 2 weeks away. So, but it opens up, and really the battlements and stuff that they have up on top look very cool. The thing that I don't really get is that I'm no weapons expert over here, but I know that with bow and arrows, this wall is supposed to be hundreds of feet high. I think like 700 feet high, and honestly, 700 feet up. I mean, I don't know if anybody's been up in a tall skyscraper before. you can hardly even see people on the ground when you're 50, 60 stories up. And this would be every bit of 60 to 65 stories straight up in the air. You know, and as the battle starts to progress, the only kind of problem that I had with things is that they're firing these arrows out over it, and they lose their strength. They know arrows don't get stronger as they fly farther, you know. No matter how hard you pull that thing, there's a distance to it that then it starts to drop off, and it does start to definitely lose some of its strength and whatnot, and obviously the trajectory changes as well. But as things open up over here, we wind up seeing a couple of different shots from different things, from different perspectives. And one of the neat things that I thought was very cool is that Samwell winds up going down. You know, John tells him to go get some sleep. He'll take, you know, he's got this night's watch. You know, go get some sleep. So Samwell goes and takes the long elevator down, and winds up being who shows up at the gate but Gilly with her small child in tow. Now, poor Gilly has been through the ringer because in addition to just getting, like, raped and beaten repeatedly at Craster's Keep and all that stuff, and then, of course, you know, everything that proceeded after that, being one of the only people alive to ever see a White Walker that tried to take her baby, she's been through the ringer, right? And whether it's a side story or it's filler, you know, for the book readers that are so pure on everything, it doesn't matter. She's been through a lot, right? And she's one of those characters that it's almost frustrating to see the things that she's gone through because it's all been negative, you know. Sam tries to go and save her by taking her to Molestown and putting her in a whorehouse, and you know, to watch the other whores' kids and stuff. And that winds up getting attacked, of course, by the then steer and you know, and obviously all the wildlings, the free folk, whatever you want to call them. And that was in last episode. So she winds up making it to Castle Black, which is about to get attacked by them again. So this poor girl cannot catch a break. Anyway, Samwell, this was a good episode for him because I was talking to my wife and son before the episode started, and my wife thought that Sam was going to wind up dying, you know. And for me, I didn't care at that point because Sam's one of those characters that he's like a lovable loser. He's tragic in the sense that you do feel for him a lot, but there's other times that it's just like too much. It's like, come on, dude. You can't even walk straight. You know, it's really getting old, you know. There was many times that it seemed like, you know, children, women, animals had more backbone than Sam had. And it was almost too much, again, with the tragic, you know, in the last episode, just whining over and over again about, oh, he condemned Gilly to die by taking her there. Dude, man up and grab your sack and get ready for the attack that's coming, okay? I understand that you feel for her and everything else and that you felt like you put her in that position. Well, you know what? Then get off your big ass and go take and sneak out in the middle of the night and go see if you can find her and see, you know, see what's going on. But you don't got the balls to do that, but you can complain and whine during the battle plans, right? This, though, was an episode for the ages as far as Sam. Sam starts questioning John about sex, which I thought was funny and awkward at the same time. Because obviously, you know, John and you agreed got down and dirty in the cave, you know. So he's asking him all these questions about it. What does it feel like? What is it this? And I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, you know. Like if John's got to give him the line about the birds and the bees. So as they're walking around up on top, John does wind up giving him some shitty details. You know, he's like, oh, well, I'm no poet, you know. It sounds like, yeah, you're right about that. John couldn't even explain really anything. He was just like all thumbs over it, man. I often wonder about that boy. But anyway, it was a good moment, and it was the beginning of Sam and his I think his real breakout character development as far as this episode goes. Because by the end of the episode, I did care if he died or not, and I do like the character much more. But anyway, he winds up bringing Gilly in, and he takes her down and locks her up in the storage facility, the storage room downstairs, I guess somewhere in Castle Black there. And but that's prior to him saying that I'll never leave you again, right? So like 2 minutes later, he puts her in the storage room. He's like, you'll be safe here. I'm going to go and I got to go do my thing now, you know, because the wall is being attacked, or it's going to be attacked. And she's like, but you just told me you weren't going to leave me. And for her, it's blinders, man. It's like, you're not going to do any good out there. The free folk, as she calls them, there's too many of them. And they're brutal, and they're just going to kill you. You're not going to survive. And Sam's like, he gives her this big speech about, no, I have to, and I took an oath, and that's what it means to be a man. And all that stuff I didn't really care too much about, because honestly, when the shit's hitting the fan like that, and he was just pining over losing her before, it seems a little bit inconsequential. But anyway, he does wind up getting his first kiss from her, which is very nice. And then if you go and you backtrack a little bit, there was a really nice, prior to her getting there, was actually, he went in the library, and he was I guess, caught, you would say, by Maester Aemon. And Aemon's the Targaryen. He once had a claim to the throne. He's blind and everything now. He's the maester, obviously, of Castle Black. And they actually had a pretty cool conversation where he talked to him about, basically about love and being in love, and how he could just tell from his voice that he loved this woman, And then Sam also, when he's talking to Jon on the wall, and I hate to backtrack with things here, but this is the first portion of the episode. When he's on the wall with Jon, he goes and says that, he basically picked apart the vows, right, that they take. And it says that you'll take no wife, you'll bear no children, but it doesn't necessarily say that you won't stick your dick in anything, right? It doesn't say that you won't have, it doesn't say expressly that you will, specifically that you will not have sex. So in Sam's mind, it's just kind of like, well, if I get the opportunity, I can. I'm not technically breaking my vows. He's justifying what he thinks and what he wants to do. And that leads into the conversation with Maester Aemon. Maester Aemon talks about obviously being a Targaryen, being in King's Landing when he was younger, and a lot of women pining for his affections. Just mainly for the, hey, I want to be married to a Targaryen, right? The blood of the dragon and all that. And it's actually a pretty cool scene between the two, because he's able to go and pick out and break down, love, and obviously how Sam does love Gilly, and Sam doesn't even know it or admit to it, at least at that point. But he explains, like I said, that he could hear it in his voice, and that's the truth. A lot of times when you have an affection for somebody, you can just tell by the way the person acts, by the way the person talks, the tonality of their voice. Just their cadence and demeanor, and just how they walk and move. You can truly tell, But I thought that it was pretty cool, and that it was pretty neat to kind of see this little conversation between the two. And really, for Sam, again, this is his kind of growth period, or at least that's what I looked at it like in this episode, was that it was his particular growth period. So, so again, the conversation between the two I thought was very touching, and it was very well done. He goes and locks Gilly up in there, and then that's really when things start to pick up, is shortly after that. As soon as that's done, as soon as she's kind of put away, so to speak, and he gives her the kiss and everything like that, I thought it was kind of like the epic first part of the first act, I guess you would say, of this episode, probably the first 15 or maybe 20 minutes. So we also, we get a little bit of a check-in next with the wildlings, or the free folk, whatever you want to call them, the raiding party of basically Ygritte and whoever else had survived, and then they wound up meeting up with the Thens. What was the other guy's name? Tormund, the red-haired guy with the big beard and everything. Tormund Giantsbane, I think his name is. And then, of course, Styr, the weird, scarred, bald cannibal guy that nobody likes. I don't think, anyway. You end up getting a check-in with them, as they have, they now have another warg that is going and actually looking atop the wall and looking for this huge fire that, of course, Mance Rayder, claimed that he was going to light. Biggest fire the North has ever seen, And as it's done with some of these different cool tracking shots where it goes and it pulls out, and then it goes and it tracks along the wall, very cool stuff. The set that was done for this, or the sets, absolutely magnificent. I mean, it was very seamless, and you couldn't really tell when it was something that was maybe CG and put in there, and when it was an actual shot of a set that had been built and painstakingly detailed. So very, very good stuff. And you wind up seeing during the course of this episode a number of different, just very, very cool defenses. And you see that even with 102, on the wall over here, I guess, and defending Castle Black, they're still very formidable against a number of, a great number, I guess you'd say, or a greater number. So as they wind up attacking, though, from the back and everybody gets ready, I really didn't like, and I tell you the truth, Ygritte, for me, she was a character that I liked in the last season, up until about the end of it, when she was, hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, when she found out that, Jon Snow actually was, still a crow and all this other stuff, and then she shot him conveniently 3 times, but not in his vital organs, because she really doesn't want to kill him. She really does love him. But the thing that kills me is that I don't understand about this whole thing, is that this wall was built thousands of years ago, before anybody and anybody's ancestors they can remember back was born, right? And the wildlings are in the north anyway, so why do they give a shit that there's a wall there that they can't get past? It's one of those things where if somebody locks a door and tells you shouldn't go in there, you want to go in there just because you're curious. They believe they have some kind of claim to the rest of the land and everybody else, and they basically just want to go through the locked door that they're not supposed to go through. Ygritte has no, as far as I know, has no allegiance to the free folk or to their cause other than that. So when her and Jon Snow got busy in the cave and she realized she had feelings for this man, regardless of what his allegiances are or where he comes from, she should have just stuck with him, in my opinion. You know, now you can say, you can argue the same thing for the other way and saying, well, if Jon cared enough about her, he could. But you know what? Jon wasn't planning on with 100,000 people going and attacking and slaughtering and mercilessly rolling across a land and killing everybody in his path and cutting a path of destruction, death and destruction. So, you know, Jon was looking to defend from that. So, I guess if there's a good and bad or a right and wrong, you would feel like Jon Snow was more on the loyal, the right side, you know. And again, that can be argued. You can really argue any of those positions in Game of Thrones. And that's one of the things that makes the show great, is that there's really very few characters that are truly black and white, good or evil. There's many characters that have evil tendencies, but are good at heart, or vice versa. Or they do a lot of things that seem despicable, but there really is a backstory and reason for what made them like that. They weren't always like that, you know. And that's one of the things I really enjoy about the actual show itself. The action sequences in this are wonderful. We actually wind up getting to see as Mance Rayder. We don't see him, of course, you know, but as far as I was concerned, this was just kind of testing. This was just sort of seeing what they could do. Now, there's this huge expanse, 300-mile wall, right? But yet they go and they decide to attack right in front of the gate, right in the couple 100-foot spot where above the wall there's actually people defending, right? They don't send anybody to climb up a half a mile down or 3/4 of a mile down that way, because that would make sense, right? You got 100,000 bodies to go and throw at this wall. You go and you throw 20, you know, to go and start climbing up. What was cool, though, is we actually got to see this giant mammoth that was very cool looking, and two of the giants, right? And the giants actually were very, very cool looking, I think. You know, they're probably 10, 11 feet tall. I mean, they're just huge. They look like these huge hulking, like if you ever, you know, if anybody ever believes in like the abominable snowman, or like the, you know, the Yeti, I guess you'd call it too, or Bigfoot or anything like that. This is kind of like an amalgamation of all those things put together and just sort of just amped up. Very, very cool looking. And as they go and they're approaching the gate, because they're going to go and try to, you know, pull the gate out and everything else, we wind up seeing, prior to that, a nice scene between Alliser Thorne, who I kind of thought was a real douchey type dick for the entire thing, and I still think he is, but now I have a lot more respect for him, right, because he was actually a badass in this episode. He has this conversation with Jon Snow about how, and Jon's got to hang by him because, remember, he's the steward, you know? He's his steward, technically, now that Mormont's dead. So he's like, he basically tells him, you know, hey, listen, you were right. We should have flooded the tunnel, you know. And Jon goes and takes the high road with it, even though he could have said, yeah, I was right. He said, listen, it was a difficult decision either way. And it is. I mean, if you think about it, that's the only entrance, you know, yeah, going it and flooding it and caving it in. Come on, man. I mean, how are you ever going to be able to dig that out if you want to actually go north again for something? Why you would ever want to go north again for anything, though, is beyond me. I'd rather just stand there and watch out for nobody coming south. You know, that's just my personal opinion, 2 cents on it. But I thought it was nice because Alliser goes in and he makes this little kind of speech to Jon and basically says, so let's get this shit done and over with so we can go back to hating each other, is more or less what it is, you know. And, you know, so he still doesn't apologize. He isn't nice to him. He doesn't, like, say, well, Jon, you know, you're actually kind of growing on me. You know, it's still that kind of like, I fucking hate you, but let's get this shit done together and then I can hate you more again, you know. But as these giants that wind up coming and, you know, with this mammoth and everything, they go and it rips out, you know, part of the wooden outer gate portion to actually get to the steel, the 4 inches of cold, hard-rolled steel, you know. And they wind up going and attaching these hooks and everything, and the mammoth starts pulling it and pretty much just trying to pull this thing apart. And it was pretty cool because as you see some of the defenses that they have, obviously on top of the wall, barrels, and they're firing, you know, arrows and everything else, you get this great shot that this huge bow winds up. Guys on the ground for Mance Rayder are trying to fire arrows up there, and they can't get them up there, right? Because, as I said, you can only fire an arrow so far. And even on a trajectory down, they're still doing damage, but 90% of them are missing. You know, they're not really taking out many of Mance Rayder's guys. But a big-ass giant, one of these giants comes over and grabs his bow and just pulls this thing back and fires, you know. Fires and hits a guy that's standing right next to Jon Snow, I think it was. Or maybe it was that other guy, Janos Slynt, because Alliser Thorne goes down at one point and leaves Janos Slynt in charge. But this arrow winds up hitting a guy and taking him off his feet and breaking him up through the little enclosure that they're in at the top of the wall, 700 feet up, mind you, and then fires him over the back end, and the guy lands. I mean, it was like, it had to be one of the worst deaths, one of the coolest deaths, I guess you would say. I shouldn't say worse, you know, because in my opinion, Oberyn's has been the worst. But very, very cool stuff. Alistair Thorne winds up at one point actually going down, and he leaves Janos Slint in charge up there. And Janos Slint is just, I'm sorry, he's just a big hulking vagina. He really is. You know, and this is the guy, if you remember, that was he was sent to the wall by Tyrion when Tyrion was the Hand of the King in the second season. But anyway, so Janos Slint is left up there in charge, and he's an idiot. They eventually have to go and get him out of there. But Alistair Thorne comes down because he hears about, obviously, the raiding party that's hitting the backside of Castle Black, and he goes down there to lead the charge. And number one, this dude is a badass, man. For like an old guy that I never really saw move much before, you know, he just kind of looks like he stands there and takes up space. He had some really cool fighting scenes, you know. He comes in and helps to turn the tide and stem the tide against, obviously, the wildlings and, you know, the Thens. And I know the Thens are just like a tribe of cannibalistic wildlings. But anyway, you know, he comes down there and just starts whipping some ass, which I thought was really good. And this was really, like I said, it was Sam's chance to shine too. You know, Sam, you know, you got John up on top of it over there, and you've got Sam and a bunch of guys that are down there. It actually looked like there was more than 100, you know, 100 defenders of the wall, I guess you would say, brothers. But I don't know. I mean, as far as the numbers go, it looked like at certain points, this Steer and Tormund, Tormund, those guys were just tearing through everybody, and then everybody else, of course, is just sort of locked in battle fighting, you know. But they were tearing through people. Ygritte took out I don't know how many people with their arrows on their way in there, and really just some of the ways that they were coming and attacking, absolutely brutal. You know, it was done very well. Alistair Thorne winds up, I don't know, probably 2/3 the way through the episode. He actually winds up going, you know, with Tormund. He winds up going, you know, one-on-one with Tormund. And it was actually a really nice shot, the way they had it from the side, and then it kind of turned back and forth to hit these different things, and they're fighting. And he was doing pretty well against Tormund. Tormund, though, however, like Jon Snow warned a few episodes ago, they use both hands. They're just more brutal fighters, you know. And that's what he winds up doing, is getting the advantage on him and actually cutting him. Alistair falls down and then was grabbed by a couple of guys, and they wind up pulling him off into somewhere. Janos Slint, they wind up making excuses to go and get him. They said that he was needed down below, you know, and that he was called for. And I think it was it Pip, maybe? It might have been Pip, Gren. Yeah, I forget their names. Pip, yeah, it was either Pip or Gren. Oh no, Pip was with. Pip was with the whole time. He was with Samwell, and Samwell's like loading up the crossbows for him, and Pip keeps firing and shooting. That's what it was. Okay. And then I think Gren was the other guy that wound up making this excuse, so so he'd have to go down. So Janos Slint would have to go down, leaving Jon Snow in charge at the top of the wall. Some of the defenses that you see on the wall are great. Towards the end of the episode, as some of these guys are coming up, climbing up and whatnot, they have this huge like ice anchor that they go and they let loose, and this thing swings down and just goes and wipes out anybody along the wall. And again, this is one of those things where you think about it and you think they only have enough people to defend like a couple 100-foot section of the wall. Why not just climb up over there and over there and over there and over there? I didn't get some of that strategy-wise. But you see some great defenses that they have. They actually do this cool-looking thing, and this reminds me of the video game Dead Space 3, where you get attached to it's like almost like rappelling, but you're rappelling straight down. And they got a couple of guys that are rappelling straight down to take out people climbing up the wall. But really, for me, the action that I thought was great, Jon Snow goes and winds up sending Gren and 5 other guys to go down and hold the inner gate, because they pour some boiling pitch down, and they wind up taking out the mammoth. The mammoth runs off, and it looks like one of the giants, the one giant that's still left, he stays there and just starts single-handedly lifting up the gate so he can get through, you know. And then I guess there's an inner gate too. And the cool thing about this gate thing is that the parallels are is that the first scene that we saw, the very first shot from Game of Thrones in Season 1 was the gate opening, you know. And now towards the end of Season 4, it's obviously somebody trying to come through the gate the other way. But he sends those 5 down to go and hold the gate no matter what against this giant that's coming in. And really, like I said, the majority of the great action for me takes place down in the actual courtyard of Castle Black as everyone is coming through and attacking. Ygritte winds up going in, and finally Pip goes and gets his due, and he's missing the whole time. He winds up finally shooting somebody, and he's all excited. He tells Sam, "I shot him, I got him," this and that. And then Sam's like, "Really? Is he the only one? Is the battle over? No, shut up and shoot more," right? As he's going to do that, Ygritte winds up, because she's like a sniper, you know, she goes and it was up in like a little tower or whatever. She winds up putting an arrow right through his freaking neck, man. And Pip falls down, blood coming out of his mouth, and Sam, winds up holding him in his arms as he dies. And Pip's one of those characters never really developed very well, but he was pretty likable. I liked him. I liked that character many times more than I liked Sam. And he has to sit there and watch him die in his arms, Eventually, things get because once Alistair goes and gets taken out of the battle, Janos Slint, when he went down there, he goes and runs off and actually winds up finding Gilly in the little storage, room or whatever, because he's a big pussy. He's not going to fight anybody. And the tides are turning against, obviously against, Castle Black. So what he winds up doing is Jon Snow goes down there, Sam goes up first to get Jon, then goes down, and the guy that's doing the elevator is Ollie. And it took me a while to place it because the kid looked familiar. That was the kid that the Thens, Steer and all them, when they attacked earlier this season, when they attacked that village. He's the one, he grabbed that kid and said, "Run to Castle Black and tell them that I'm going to eat your papa and your mama." And Ygritte wound up actually going and killing this kid's parents, his dad or his mom or whatever, with her arrows and stuff from a distance. So I put it all together as I was watching it again, and then I wound up going back and actually watching that part, and I think it was episode 3 or something, 2 or 3. But anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. So Jon Snow winds up having to come down and fight, and he does. He comes down in an heroic battle fashion. I think that's what really threw me off about this episode, is that this is very much like the heroic, like the heroes try to stem back the tides of evil. And, that's not Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is not based on, the good person winning or the side of right and just and whatever winning, So the fact that, Jon Snow didn't get beheaded in this episode by some weird thing or get shot in the face by Ygritte, to me is un-Game of Thrones. I've gotten so used to the shit that you don't expect to happen happening that when it does come time that you get this sort of run-of-the-mill action, good guys fight the bad guys and fight them back, you don't believe it. At least that was me. I don't believe it. So anyway, as the fight winds up progressing, I thought it was great how there was one shot, and if you pay attention to it, it's about 42 minutes in, I think, where they actually did this cool camera panning all around the courtyard, and everybody is fighting, right? And I mean, just the way that everything, I don't even know how they choreographed something that big, but there's just 50, 60 different people fighting. There's fires being lit. There's arrows being loosed everywhere. Just wonderfully done. What winds up happening, though, is as Jon Snow cuts a path through several of the raiders, him and that guy Steer winds up getting eyes on him. And now Ygritte warned everybody beforehand that Jon Snow was hers. She was going to wind up killing him, and if anybody tried to stop her from doing that or tried to kill him first, she was going to put an arrow through their head. So Steer winds up going and coming at him, and this dude's like a foot taller than Jon Snow, right? And of course, Jon, although he's a formidable fighter, he was trained in the proper way of combat, with armor and swords and honor and all that shit. And we know that they don't fight like this. They just fight like wildlings, like beasts, right? Wild animals. So this fight was brutal. Within the first 30 seconds, Jon gets his head grabbed and smashed against an anvil. I thought he was fucking out, man. I mean, I winced when I saw it and heard the noise, sound effects, beautifully done. And as this fight goes and progresses on, I'm just thinking, oh, this is not good. This is going to be the end for Jon Snow, And then I was thinking, maybe Ygritte, because she sees it from a distance. I'm like, maybe she'll go and put an arrow through Steer's head, and then all of a sudden she'll be like, oh, I love you, Jon Snow, You know nothing, Jon Snow. I love you, though. But as the battle progresses, Jon winds up actually going, and towards the end when it looked like he was going to be like he was all done. I mean, it got into the point where it was a hand-to-hand combat battle, and this dude was just bigger and stronger, burlier, everything, But one of the coolest scenes, I thought, death scenes, I guess you would call it, though, very well done, was that Jon finally goes and winds up grabbing a hammer, and he winds up grabbing a hammer like a blacksmith would use to pound out and he winds up taking the hammer and just thunk right into Steer's head. And I thought that was done very well, because this is a guy that, honestly, he didn't get a whole lot of character development. Whenever you saw him, he was just this dark, evil character, and he was just dark and evil just because that's how he is, I guess. We never got any explanation for it. He's just like that. He's just a dickhead. He likes eating people, whatever, So it was nice to see him get his due. And I assume that right after that, when Ygritte appears and has an arrow, pointed right at Jon Snow, she hesitates for a minute. And I was thinking, I was like, oh my God, what's going to happen? What's going to happen, Prior to that, we'll go away from that for a second. We'll leave you hanging. Prior to that, though, Samwell actually goes and kills a person, an actual living person that is now dead after Sam. it was one of the Thens that were running at him, you know. And Sam goes and he's loading up his crossbow, and even under pressure as this guy's charging at him, he loads the crossbow, raises it up, fires it, and whether it was a luck shot or what, I think it was a lick and a prayer personally, goes boom right through the guy's head. And I was just like, yeah, Sam, right? So anyway, we wind up also getting a shot where that giant that got in is trying to charge the inner gate, and we just kind of get we get Gren and those other 4 or 5 guys that are all just like, all right, we got to man up. A lot of them want to run, you know, and he's running towards this gate, and then it just kind of the shot ends right as he crashes into the gate, and it looks like he went right through it. But anyway, we go back to Jon Snow and Ygritte, and right as it looks like she's about to loose the arrow on him, you can tell there's all kinds of feelings. There's love, there's hatred, there's all this sort of stuff. All of a sudden, she takes an arrow. And I had to laugh. I had to laugh at it because Ygritte was a character that I liked. She's a beautiful woman, the actress that portrays her. But besides that, she's a character that I liked for a while. But then after all the bullshit at the end of last season and how she acted this season, my like meter went down big time. I know they tried to redeem her in the last episode when she let Gilly and the baby live, you know. But prior to that, when she was going through and just methodically killing innocent people for no reason other than, you know, the free folk said that's what we should do. Mance told us to do it, you know. I didn't like the character anymore. So I actually laughed when she got shot. Now, I didn't laugh at the part of the scene after that, but it was just, for me, it was like poetic justice. The person who shot her, right, he was cowering in fear most of the episode, but it was that kid Ollie, the one who she killed his parents. So for once, we wound up actually getting a fitting retribution and a fitting death. It was it fit the characterization and just everything very well for that to happen, and for him to go and man up at that point and help to defend Castle Black after his village and his family had been just brutally killed and then eventually eaten, obviously, which is what Steer told him they were going to do. And for him to go and get enact his vengeance upon the person who actually killed one of his parents, I thought was very well done. So that I enjoyed, you know, and I may root for the underdog and all other type of stuff, and that's just me. I like it, you know. The scene though where she goes and falls, Jon Snow grabs her and falls into her arms. It was very touching the way the scene played out, because for Jon Snow, I mean, this was he didn't know any love before that. I don't know if he had been with any you know, horrors or whatever in Winterfell, obviously. He seemed like he was a little more of an honorable type of guy, even though he's the bastard son of Ned Stark and everything else. But I felt for both of them, you know. Her last words are, you know nothing, Jon Snow. And it was before that she wound up saying, you know, we should have stayed in that cave. And basically what she's explaining is that was the pivotal moment. That was the moment in her life, the moment in their relationship, that she realized that she cared for something other than just having this hatred towards anybody that was not a free folk or a wildling. And it was also the time where Jon Snow, even though he was kind of playing double agent and pretending to, like, it was something other than getting his pee-pee wet, okay? It was, whether it was love or not, he doesn't actually say that to her, but you can tell that there was an amount of caring, compassion, and just passion between the two. And that's ultimately why it was difficult for him to go and to leave, you know, and that's why even though she shot him, that's why it was difficult for her to go and just put one through his head, you know, or through his heart. So it was a very touching scene. It was done very well, and ultimately that's, you know, that was one of the climactic parts, I guess you would say, of the episode that, you know, that kind of ended it off for me. Afterwards, everything else is just kind of getting mopped up. We wind up getting Tormund. He's taken several arrows, and he took out several guys, to be fair with him, right? And then as he goes and tries to say something to Jon Snow, he won't stop fighting, you know. Jon Snow just goes and picks up, this is of course after he's, you know, pined over the death of Ygritte a little bit, but he goes and picks up a crossbow, puts another arrow into him, and then just basically goes and walks right up to him and has everybody restrain him so they can question him later on, you know, maybe get some insight into what Mance's plans are. Things that I did not like about the episode, though, was the fact that we didn't see Mance Rayder. We didn't see him all season. We didn't even see him in this first battle. And I don't need to see him at the front lines, okay? But a shot of Mance Rayder would have been nice, and I think would have really helped to legitimize the fact that there was this huge army of wildlings. The fire that he set, yeah, this thing was the size of a lake, man. I mean, it was huge. And the way everything was done, whether it was CG or a lot of stand-ins or a combination of both, it was done very well. You felt that it was an epic scale. But even Jon Snow says, you know, when Sam's like, this is great, this is a win for us, Jon's like, you know what, they'll be back tonight. They're just testing us. They're testing our defenses to see what we can handle and what we can't, how many of us there are. you know, and they still outnumber us 1,000 to 1, because even if and eventually they're going to get to the point where they're going to run out of, you know, boiling pitch and arrows and whatever, you know. So I think that's the whole idea, is that you can just keep throwing numbers against them. And I mean, they already got through to the inner gate. We wind up seeing, too, towards the end of the episode, John goes and talks about how he's going to go out and he's going to meet Mance and try to go and kill him, you know. I don't know if Mance knows that he's a traitor and that he's turned back on him, he was a double agent, or what he's going to do, how he's going to even get close to him to kill him, but that's John's plan. Sam, who's pretty smart, doesn't have anything better. But we wind up getting this scene that I thought was pretty good. They didn't actually show what happened when that giant crashed through the gate, but we wound up seeing that Gren and his guys actually held the gate. They're all dead. And Gren's actually like underneath the giant had half fell on him, but they actually were able to slay this giant and take him down and hold the gate. They did their job, and it was another loss because, you know, it was a good character, it was a likable character. I think for me the main thing is, though, I'm not as attached to a lot of the different characters and the story that's going on at Castle Black, and although I know it's important to the overarching plot in Game of Thrones, to me it's not as interesting as what's going on in King's Landing or across the Narrow Sea, in Essos, and just some of the other areas that we've seen in Game of Thrones. It's one of those that it didn't have a whole lot of development, and it didn't have a whole lot of characters that were just like super likable. I shouldn't even say likable, but there wasn't a lot of that soap opera like you know, plot lines dangling over there. There was a couple things going on. It's also worth noting too that Samwell towards the end of that battle goes and unleashes Jon's wolf. Which I thought was pretty cool. You know, we wind up seeing the wolf get, you know, Tara throw it out of one of the you know, one of the raiding party of the wildlings. So, all in all, a very good episode. Was the battle more epic and bigger and better in a lot of ways than Blackwater in season 2, episode 9? Absolutely, it was. They have a bigger budget now. Game of Thrones is breaking all kinds of records. I guess yesterday's episode and last week's, I think, broke the viewership record that HBO had. That The Sopranos had held for more than a decade, which was a great show. So Game of Thrones is only getting bigger and better and catching more steam, even with all the crazy character deaths and just never knowing where anything's coming. That's part of the charm and magic of the show. But really, I'm looking forward to next week's episode, the season finale. I'm sad that it's going to be over already, but at the same time, I want to see some of those plot lines get tied up, because I felt like this episode could have been split up amongst the last 2 episodes, and then you could have taken us occasionally away from the battle to show us some other things. I feel that it was a mistake to hang. Now, of course, you know, hey, that's fine. I'm just some idiot talking on YouTube over here. But I feel that it was a mistake for the producers to go and to do that, and to take us away from everything else completely and not give us any type of check-in with what's going on. I believe that it dehumanizes a little bit what happened with Oberyn, because Oberyn, for me, yeah, was a great character, and he was introduced this year, and I did get attached to him very quickly. But Oberyn's death, really, to me, it signified the loss of hope and light, you know, that there might be, because Oberyn had a very pure and just reason, with obviously the vengeance for what happened, the revenge for what happened to his sister and to his niece and nephew. So, for what happened with that, to just leave you hanging for 2 weeks, I think is a slap in the face to the viewers. And then to go and say, here, watch this hour-long action movie. And that's really what it was. But, you know, again, I mean, it wasn't that I didn't like it. I just felt like it could have been done a little bit differently. So, very, very good episode. I did enjoy it. I enjoyed especially, like I said, a lot of just the crazy, crazy action that we had going on there. We found out that Alistair Thorne is actually a badass. And even though he's a dick that can actually fight, and he's not afraid to jump in there and be the first one to go in and attack. So, again, all in all, very good. My episode question for you, though, brothers and sisters, is what were your thoughts overall on the episode? And, of course, the episode being solely focused on Castle Black. Do you think that it was good that they did that, or would you have preferred having maybe half of the episode devoted to the battle at Castle Black there, and then maybe the other half devoted to some of the other things that we're inevitably going to see next week in the season finale? Leave your answer to that question in the comments down below. Feel free to hit the thumbs up, the like button if you should think that I deserve it, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. We will look forward to catching all of you in the next one, Nation.
You know nothing, Jon Snow. Remember to subscribe to my other channels, as well as follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.